All right, welcome back to BuffaloPlus.com and the Buffalo Plus YouTube channel. I'm now joined by NFL Network's Mike Giardi. Mike, really appreciate you coming on here in the heat of this free agent, craziness that's going on. I want to start with a tweet you had on Monday. You listed all of the Patriots players that they had pretty much signed and ended the tweet with "great googly moogly." I think that's pretty well said. Were you surprised by just how active New England was in this free agency?
Look, I thought they would. Obviously, we're going to spend some money. They had a ton. I think the third most cap room in the league, coming off this odd year with COVID and the cap going down. And they were poised to do certain things, but I didn't think they would be this active. In fact, I was thinking, well, you signed 4 or 5 of these guys in that, mid to upper tier level. And then, you just sort of fill out your roster. Instead, they just went bananas. And if you're looking at sort of some of the ways that they've structured these contracts, they're still keeping the numbers down for this year. They still have room to do other things, which is kind of crazy when you consider all the players they've added. But look, I think they're still keeping an eye towards quarterback and maybe some flexibility there as well. So, very active. And I think it just tells you 7-9 didn't sit well with anybody. They're just not used to it. They didn't like it. And then, wherever percentage you want to put on it, to see Tom Brady go do what he did after that relationship ended, has to up the ante for a competitive person. And they certainly are in Foxborough.
Yeah, and I think NFL contracts are tricky to understand because they can be 2-year, they're 4-year deals, but they can be voided after 2 years and all those things. Because that's the other thing. People are going, well, they're spending all this money. Like, these aren't going to be good deals in a couple of years. Like, isn't that a problem for future Bill Belichick to have to worry about? That right now he needs to get back to, winning division titles, right?
For sure. And the way they structured some of these deals, to your point, they're more like 2-year deals. And in 2 years, everyone expects the cap is going to explode because of the new television deals. So all of a sudden, you're going to look at a Matthew Judon making whatever, $15 million, $16 million a year and say, relatively speaking, for that position, when the cap goes up $250 million, which I've seen some people project it getting to in a couple of years, that's, chump change, really. So, to me, again, the heavy motivation for them was playing the way they did last year and then taking a long view of their roster and saying, look, we got old in some spots. We didn't have enough skill talent, especially a wide receiver and obviously a tight end. I mean, some of the stats that I've dropped over the last 3 days about the lack of production that they got from both of those positions are staggering. They had 3 red zone targets in the last 2 years for their tight ends. Now, who does that? Like, Lee Smith gets 2 a year in Buffalo. I know he's been traded to Atlanta.
I'm glad we got a Lee Smith reference.
He's a blocking tight end. They don't throw to him, and he's still getting targets in the red zone every once in a while. They couldn't even find targets for guys that they drafted and tried to develop last year.
It's crazy because, especially here in Buffalo, people are talking about what the Patriots are doing is what the Bills used to do because they drafted poorly and to get players to come in, I've seen people tweet the Patriots used to get discounts because players would want to come and play with Brady. That's not the case anymore, is it? I guess, what do you make of the additions that they needed to spend the money? They've guaranteed over $200 million, but they got some real talent. And I think, to your point, that's what they needed. That's what they've been lacking.
Yeah, I mean, look, history shows that you spend big in free agency, it usually doesn't work out for you. There's a reason why the Jaguars have spent like drunken sailors for 10 years, and I think they've had one winning season during the course of that time. This is a different situation for the Patriots, though, and there is a little bit of you're trying to change the narrative. Like, people came here because of Bill, but also because of Tom, and then Tom takes people with him to go to Tampa, and then Tampa wins, and now everybody wants to go to Tampa, and Bill's saying, wait a minute, I think I'm still the best coach in the league, maybe in the history of the league. And we still feel really good about our program. But okay, if in this moment we have to overpay at certain spots to get guys in here, if we can do that and then be back to 12-4 and be back to the playoffs and be back to competing for AFC titles and AFC championships and Super Bowls, then it's worth it, right? Because then all of a sudden the narrative will once again change. You'll be like, well, Bill still knows how to do it. They still know how to run a program in New England and still know how to be competitive at the highest of levels.
It just still feels like the Patriots have swung and missed on a couple draft picks. You were just talking about it on the NFL Network that they drafted 2 third-round tight ends and they swung and missed. But you just have that thought that Belichick is playing chess while everybody else is playing checkers. Like, he still is that piece that here in Buffalo, they're not happy with the amount of production they've gotten out of Dawson Knox. And the Bills were I was saying that Jonnu Smith would have been a perfect fit in Buffalo. And Hunter Henry was probably going to be a little bit out of their range. and they both go to New England. Like, how much have they closed the gap in terms of the division?
Well, I definitely think that the talent gap has shrunk some, but what I would say is, and it's a big deal, is the quarterback in Buffalo right now is one of the 4 or 5 best guys in the league, and is someone who's still, they believe, ascending. I believe ascending. You believe ascending. Yep. Whereas the Patriots have a situation where they're paying Cam Newton essentially $3.5 million guaranteed. And if you hit all these incentives, they're basically winning the Super Bowl, because some of those incentives would mean that he's playing at a 2015 level. I don't think he's that quarterback anymore. Quite frankly, I don't think they think he's that quarterback anymore. Yeah. And when I talk about having room to do other things, there's still an eye on the quarterback position. And I'm confident that they're going to add a quarterback. I'm just not sure whether it's going to be in the draft or whether it's going to be Jimmy Garoppolo. And quite frankly, that's the one that I think they're sort of hanging on hopes that whether Deshaun Watson gets moved to San Francisco decides they like somebody better in the draft, and where they're positioned at 12, they can probably slide up and get a Trey Lance or somebody like that at 7 or 8. And I think then the hope is that Garoppolo comes free and that they have a competition with Garoppolo and Cam Newton. I mean, they loved Garoppolo when he was here. Belichick has some crazy quotes about him from his time here, including one where he said, if you didn't know what you were watching and you just closed your eyes, when you watch Brady in practice and you watch Jimmy in practice, you think you're watching the same player. So it hasn't quite worked out the way that that Jimmy would have liked to in San Francisco and the way San Francisco would have liked to. But I think there's sort of an interesting spin on what's happened with him in San Francisco. There's people in San Francisco that don't want him. And I always say, be careful what you wish for, because I think they're closer to the top end at quarterback in San Francisco than they are at the bottom. And when you're close to the bottom, you're doomed.
Yeah, absolutely. And switching gears to the Bills, I want to get your opinion on, it seemed like, again, before Monday, the Bills seemed like one of the winners in free agency, just with the way that Brandon Beane was able to bring back Feliciano and to bring back Darrell Williams and to re-sign Matt Milano, like all of those things that here in Buffalo and around Western New York, we're like 1 or 2 would be great. We understand that. I even said that I think the COVID and the shrunken salary cap has actually helped the Bills, just because there hasn't been as much money, and that, maybe Milano went out there and saw, like, I don't know if I can get $15 million, so I'll just stay here and maybe again in 2 years, like we talk about, we can reevaluate a new deal. But what are your thoughts to the Bills kind of just being team run it back?
I think they have had a great offseason. I do. I tweeted about Brandon Beane's been on like a 3-year heater where pretty much everything that he touches turns to gold. And I thought this offseason, I was with you, that I was looking at, I don't know that they're going to be able to pull off bringing Milano back. I don't know if they can keep Darrell Williams. You're looking at all these things, and they get all these guys back, and they get them on what I consider relatively team-friendly deals. And I think the fact that you targeted your own guys and said, this is what we want to do and this is what we want to keep, and you were able to keep those guys, and even some guys willingly restructuring, Mitch Morse, Vernon Butler, that to me says a lot about the program that Brandon and Sean have built. And that is why I still think they're the team to beat in the AFC East and one of the teams to beat in the AFC period. I mean, it's adding someone like Emmanuel Sanders. It's just smart. It's just smart business. They to me have done exactly what Tampa did, right? Tampa's running it back with the same guys. They won a title. You didn't quite win a title, but you put yourself in the conversation. You're bringing those guys back, and you will have in coming years flexibility to do some different things that add to it if you can't get over the hump this season.
Any other things that you're hearing? Maybe one more move. I know there's whispers of Zach Ertz that they seem to be kicking around the tires. I think that's a lot of money in Ertz's final year of his contract. I know that obviously contracts can be restructured and stretched out. We know Beane's been really good at doing some of those things. Are you hearing anything else, or do you expect the Bills to make any other move throughout this free agency period?
Well, I think what's interesting now is that there is a stagnation in the market for some of the bigger name players and at certain positions, wide receiver being one of them. And maybe you're not going to delve into that market, but again, maybe someone else then looks at it and says, we were deciding between an edge guy and a linebacker, but Kenny Golladay is still there. And we might be able to get Kenny Golladay on a 1 or 2 year deal for $20 million total. And that's just something we can't say no to because of the upside of the player. And then all of a sudden it's the trickle down effect. And all of a sudden that guy you didn't think was going to be available, who was going to be available at that cost, is there. So I think that's something that you really kind of have to pay attention to over the next few days, because I think guys are going to start to get impatient. Like, hey, I need a job. Like I need, and the money is drying up. And to your point, I believe tight end remains something that they're focused on in Buffalo. And I think it makes a lot of sense. You want to give, when Dawson's at his best, you have a player with some really good upside who could be something pretty good in this league for a long time. But health has been a problem and consistency has been a problem. So if you can add a veteran like Ertz, and clearly would have to redo his deal, then that's something I think you have to really consider in Buffalo, because it gives you that security blanket to go along with what Cole does. And then Steph, I mean, that'd be a hell of a combination to throw out at teams if you could somehow manage to get Zach Ertz in Buffalo.
It's crazy because last year, the Bills sweeping the division, and, I still think there is a little bit of Bills fans and the Bills Mafia just being like, well, we won the division. Like, we're still top dogs. And yes, you still have Josh Allen, and that is a massive thing. And like you said, to have him it gives you a leg up. I think it makes guys that have been there want to stay around a little bit more. But I just find it nearly impossible that the Bills will repeat as undefeated in the division, because we haven't even talked about the Jets and Dolphins. Carl Lawson, Corey Davis, like everybody kind of got exponentially better talent-wise. Plus, Robert Saleh is, seen as a much better coach in the eyes compared to Adam Gase. So is there any quick hitters that you know about, or your thoughts on the Jets and the Dolphins and just the division as a whole has got a lot of fun? We were messaging back and forth being like, this is going to be crazy.
Yeah. I mean, the Jets, I think, are still a ways away. I think there's that talent was that roster was fairly bereft of talent, which doesn't speak well to the job that Adam Gase did or the previous GM. And now Joe Douglas is trying to rebuild it. They're going to likely pick a quarterback at number 2. So we'll see how quickly Zach Wilson, I would assume, is going to will assimilate into the pro game. Didn't really play a hard schedule at BYU. He's got a ton of talent. Don't get me wrong, but that could be a leap for him, and there could be some serious growing pains. I mean, I thought when Sam Darnold was drafted there, I'm like, oh, they've got their quarterback, and it hasn't really turned out that way. Miami's interesting to me because I thought, look, they went all in last year in terms of free agency, and they hit on some of it, and they missed on some of it. They already cut Kyle Van Noy after just 1 year, signing a $51 million deal from the Patriots. And they're really quiet and are keeping flexibility open. And to me, part of it, I think, is Chris Greer's conservative nature. I know they spent last year, but I think that's more of who he is. They just had the money to do it last year. But part of it is Deshaun Watson and keeping an eye on what's happening with Deshaun Watson. And I know there have been rumors about, well, maybe he only wants Denver and San Francisco. Somebody else in Miami said, no, Miami and the Jets are on the list. Like, who knows? If he really wants to get out of Houston, if it's really that bad, which it seems to be really that bad for him for whatever reason, then I think maybe, all right, I don't want to go to New York, but I gotta expand my list a little bit here.
Yeah.
I can't leave you completely hanging. And I think Miami is sort of keeping an eye on that. They're committed to Tua, but like 25, 26, 27 other teams in the league, if Deshaun Watson is made available, then you kick your guy to the curb and try to get, or you try to go all in on Deshaun Watson and kick your guy to the curb. And I think that would happen with Tua as with 25, 26 other teams around the league.
Mike, I appreciate the time. I know you're super busy this time of the year, so I appreciate it. Keep up the great work on NFL Network. We'll be following along. I really appreciate you stopping by here on BuffaloPlus.com.
No problem. A lot of fun.
Take care.